Hello and welcome to Talk on Nevada. I'm your host, Andy Matthews. Funding Entrepreneurial Education. That's the title of a new commentary out by Patrick Gibbons of the Nevada Policy Research Institute. And it's also the subject of this week's program. And here to join me and talk about it is Patrick Gibbons. Patrick, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Okay. Patrick, you've come out with this commentary this week at PRI.org, and it's the first of a series on this topic. And you note in this first installment that one education reform idea that's actually gaining broad support on both sides of the political spectrum is the idea of school decentralization. What is that? How does that work?
Well, the idea behind school decentralization is to move decision-making down from the state legislature, down from the central office at the school district to the local school. You give the principals and the teachers the power to decide how the budgets are going to be used, what the school's curriculum is going to be, and how they're going to teach the students.
Now, it's rare, of course, that you get individuals on both sides of the political aisle to agree on much of anything. Yet you note in your commentary that this is an issue that's actually gaining support from people of all different political stripes. What is it about this issue that's making it so broadly popular?
Right, well, here in Nevada in 2007 you had the Republicans and Democrats working together to create an empowerment school bill. You've got the Clark County School District currently running with the empowerment school issue, and so you have the support of the teachers union, you have the support of other groups like Beacon. Nationwide, you have the Hoover Institution, it's a conservative free market think tank, and the Reason Foundation, a libertarian think tank, writing praise about this concept. You have, on the left, you have the Center for American Progress and the National Education Association, the teachers union, writing, and they found that if structured properly, that these empowerment schools, school decentralization, could actually lead to more equitable funding between low-income and high-income schools. So the right and the left are coming from different angles. The right sees this as a way is to save money and use resources efficiently, and the left tends to agree with that, but also tends to note that this can actually lead to equity in funding between high-income and low-income schools.
Patrick, you've written critically in the past, and you get into this also in your latest commentary. You've been critical of the way we currently approach the idea of education funding, how we go about actually spending money on public education. Explain how we do it now and why exactly it's problematic.
Well, I've likened it to the Soviet command-style economy. You essentially have a central office that is directing how resources are going to be used. So you've got a legislature that says this is how many resources you receive. The school district says this is what you will spend it on, how much you will spend on it. They dictate the number of teachers that the schools will have, how many guidance counselors and nurses and principals, and it's all based on a complicated formula. It's usually called a weighted staffing formula, and essentially the schools receive units or FTEs, full-time equivalents, that are used to ration staff to the schools. On top of that, here in like Clark County, for example, the school district will also fund the schools like 50 cents per pupil or something like that to cover printing supplies or other things like that. And the school will receive that money in a budget that is approved by the school district, but anything left over is completely controlled by the school district. They have to have their purchase request approved by up to 6 different central officers at the school district. They have a credit card that limits any discretionary purchases to $1,000 at a time. So they're hamstrung on how they're going to use those resources. And it's just not efficient. The central office is not in a position to understand the needs of the students. Neither are the state legislators or the governors. The people who know what's best are the parents, the teachers, and the principals. And they're the ones who need to have the most control over how the resources are going to be used.
So you think then that this decentralization effort they put into place is going to help remedy this problem?
If properly structured, if we create the right incentives and have the right rules in place, empowerment schools, as we call them, are going to do a much better job at efficiently allocating resources and ensuring that those resources are going to be dedicated to programs that work. It's no longer going to be a situation where we're funding jobs for adults or programs just for the sake of funding programs, but we're actually funding results.
What's relevant about this issue in Nevada today? You know, what's going on here in Nevada in terms of school decentralization that made you decide to really take a look at this issue now?
Well, in 2007, the legislature passed an empowerment school bill requiring Washoe County and Clark County to adopt a pilot empowerment program where 5% of their schools would be converted to empowerment schools. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. Both Washoe and Clark County haven't followed the letter of the law, but Clark County is making an effort. They started in 2006 to adopt empowerment schools. And this seemed like an area of reform that, since Democrats and Republicans already supported, is something that we needed to research further to understand what it is, what it plans to do, what it can do, and what it's achieved in other areas.
I wanted to get into sort of the issue of education funding because you, as we noted earlier, you've been critical about the way we currently approach it. By most accounts, Nevada, in terms of public education spending, is toward the bottom of the 50 states. And you know, one issue on which there seems to be widespread agreement here in the state is that educational achievement is poor. Even if you accept, you know, your argument that we need to really improve efficiency, and there are ways to shift power, shift control in a way that's going to maximize the use of those dollars, how do you dispute the argument that, you know, we're not spending a lot on education compared to other states, we're not getting the results? At least a part of the equation should be to increase funding. Isn't that the case?
Well, certainly that the more funding you have, the more programs you can buy, the more teachers you can have. And there probably isn't a teacher in the state of Nevada or a principal that wouldn't want to have more resources. It just buys you more stuff. The problem is that in the past, this hasn't produced results. And the Center for Reinventing Public Education at the University of Washington essentially said that public education is simply has been funding jobs for adults and programs and not necessarily funding things that actually produce results.
All right, Patrick, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Of course, I want to thank all of you for tuning into this week's edition of Talk on Nevada. Be sure to read Patrick's commentary on this topic at npri.org and check back in the coming weeks for Patrick's additional installments on this topic. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.